Good morning, viewers. Welcome to Frankly Speaking with Vibhuti Jha. I'm very happy to share that, I am with my good old friend, Dr. Dipak Nandi, who is a psychiatrist and an entrepreneur who is on the program. He and I talked about coronavirus 4 weeks ago, talking about its impact and implications for the world around us. Ever since then, no conversation can be had unless you talk about coronavirus because it's dominating the entire process of our lives. And one of the things that we had talked about, Deepak, was the fact that, it will have impact and implication for societies, economics, and politics, and the way technology is being used. So now we realize that we are using the technology to record this program, to do this program, not in the studio from our respective home offices, so to say. So that said, let's begin by a very good news that has come about, and you may have come to know about it as well, that the Serum Institute in Pune, India, has come up with a potential vaccine, and they're going to start a test in a couple of days' time, and they expect that, subject to completion of this human testing, they will be able to release the vaccines at 5 million quantities by September 2020. This is a signal major input from India, development in India that has happened. India has been on the forefront of the coronavirus fight. Prime Minister Modi was the first one to kind of impose a countrywide quarantine. He also was the one who initiated the campaign to pay, to respect the frontline fighters through Tali and Thali combination together. And today the whole world is following that. The second important news to begin with, Deepak, is also that the fact that India is now being brought in, is scheduled to be brought in WHO at a significantly higher position and authority to monitor the whole process. And at some point in time, there was news that India may be in the forefront. Prime Minister Modi may be asked to lead the task force in this regard, in terms of accountability and responsibility part of it. But these are very signal developments in the fight against coronavirus. So Deepak, let's hear your thoughts on this one as to what is your opinion going forward on this matter.
I studied this Serum Institute's CEO's declaration, and I got some comments from my good immunologist, virologist friends. We are all very skeptical about it. Sure, the research has begun, but to bring it to the market by this September of 2020 is heroic in nature. And even if he succeeds, it will be only for the Indian market. It has nothing to do with the US market because the drug has to go through the FDA studies and FDA approval, bring it to the US market, which will take another good 12 to 14 months.
Correct.
So while it is good news, but it is mostly good news for India, but I hope he is correct and his words go to God's ears directly. Vaccines, even if it is partially potent, will be of immense value, because even if it does not work 100%, it is of immense value because what it will do is decrease the severity of the illness, and you will not need to be hospitalized, and you will have a milder form of the disease on an outpatient basis. So that is all good news. And having said that, I can say that India is moving in the forefront very well. India is a country right now is blessed with a season with a lot of sunshine, abundance of sunshine, and abundance of clean air because of no pollution. And all those factors itself will kill the virus. And we have seen the incidence of the coronavirus disease to be the least in India. Yes, the media talks about that adequate testing is not being done, all the cases are not being counted. Even if all those were counted for, India is going through the least amount of the disease except for the West Coast, which is Bombay and Kerala, and New Delhi, because of the travel, because of the people that come from the West. Except for the international airport neighborhoods where there is a lot of people that is coming from outside, we are not seeing that huge incidence in the East Coast. We are seeing very little incidence in West Bengal, the whole of the Northeast Assam area, very little in Orissa, Bihar, and that whole zone.
Right. I mean, this particular thing is the Indian context because we are originally Indians, we are now Americans. So both the countries which have, significant relationship going on right now as we speak, the collaboration is key for the entire process. And India has somewhere on the line, by sheer process of quarantine, has, made sure that it doesn't spread through physical distances being not the required one. I choose to use the word physical distance rather than social distance because physical distance is the one which needs to be maintained and social connectivity is required because you cannot live, without the social connectivity as you and I are showing it today because television programs are on, stock market is working, and to my great joy and surprise, I think our National Football League deserves some massive kudos for being able to hold the draft for NFL in a remarkably successful way from the homes of every draft player. And I watched it to some extent, and I was really impressed that the owners, coaches are sitting in their own homes, and the players are in their own home with their families. And the draft, the whole thing through media, was done remarkably well. The second part was also very important, was something which was impressed me, is that we have talked about the social, economic, political impact of it. So a company called Social Capital launched an IPO, raising $770 million last, 2 days ago. And the CEO of that said that if I could raise this money in an IPO in this particular way, that means I don't have to go to office, that rest of the IPOs can also be managed. Now, not everybody is going to do that, but these are clear pointers to how the future of world is going to likely look like post-coronavirus scenario. Where do you think that, as it is, many governors have begun to open, the economy in a selected way. Mr. Trump laid down the conditions, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 for opening. Gradually, we have to return to being who we were and doing things normal. How do you see the normalcy return? In what way?
So, President Trump is doing the right thing. He has a wonderful team who is giving him the best scientific advice. He is combining the scientific advice with the political stances that he needs to take and has made an appropriate amalgam. So in the states where there has been the least amount of incidence of the disease, he is allowing the governors to make the decision because this whole thing is location, location, location. So the decision is made at the county level, is made at the state level, and at last at the federal level. He is there to support them, and he's able to give them accurate phase 1 to phase 4 guidelines. But it is up to the governors to execute and implement so that we can slowly get this robust economy back so that we are able to call a spade and we have an appropriate reaction to the virus, and we do not use a sledgehammer to kill a mosquito. In cities like New York City, in cities like Miami, and all these areas, obviously one would need a lot of extra power in terms of social distancing, in terms of making sure that we take the time. But in places like Montana, North Dakota, Wyoming, where there has been hardly any incidents, one can slowly open up. The president has talked in length about his displeasure of Governor Kemp in Georgia, who is opening up, including the barber salon and the nail cutting places and the medical spas and the cosmetic spas, where President Trump has been talking about taking more time about it. So what we see is the political left pushing be going to an absolute zero concept. That means everything should stay closed till there is zero death. That way they get to see the total collapse of the economy. People get unemployed and there is a civil unrest, which will lead to a guarantee of the defeat of President Trump. So President Trump is very cautious about it. He's aware of it. What is the motive of the Democrats? And because remember, President Trump was the first guy who blocked the travel ban in January 31st. It was that time presidential candidate Joe Biden who called him xenophobic. And
Right.
the whole month of February, the liberal media kept saying that he is overreacting. They were criticizing him when he stopped the travel ban from Europe, when he stopped the travel ban from England, and most of this New York contamination happened from the Europe.
Right.
So no matter what he does, the left media is bent upon destroying his.
you brought in the perhaps the, as the saying goes, politics gets into everything, right? So there is a politics of coronavirus.
Correct.
Now, what has happened is that all the political rallies have stopped. So the Democratic candidate, presumptive candidate Joe Biden can't campaign, nor is Trump campaigning. He's in White House addressing press conferences, but the media is now playing it as if president is using the press conferences, updating the people about the virus and what they're doing as his campaign rhetoric. Now, but that you and I know that may be relevant, but not necessarily true. He did not invent that press conference, nor did he bring about coronavirus to silence Biden and be in the forefront. So let's kind of get real about it. That's what I want to tell fellow media people and the Democratic Party people. Don't politicize that it hurts you. Because right now, Trump is involved in protecting the lives of the Americans. But his detractors are making it look like as if he was responsible. I don't know what news people watch, but what antagonizes me, what angers me, not antagonize, actually angers me, is that our state of New York is totally skewing the data on coronavirus disease, infections, and deaths. We have the maximum number of deaths in the country, coronavirus in New York City and New York State, including the people who are affected by that. And Mayor Blasio of New York City and Governor Cuomo are almost pretending to be the knights on the white stallion trying to rescue the damsel in distress. That it irritates me as a citizen, that what are they claiming for? They are the ones who are responsible for entire American data going up the air and the deaths that is happening. What do you say? How do you tell the Democrats and the media, hey, for God's sake, don't do this?
So 88% of the people who go on ventilator end up dying, whether they're in New York or whether they're in Los Angeles or whether they're in Seattle or whether they are in Switzerland. They will end up dying. So Governor Cuomo wanted to create a Mount Everest in front of President Trump that we will need 40,000 ventilators. President Trump made sure we have enough ventilators. Right now in the state of New York, there is not one patient who was denied ventilator. There is not even one patient who was denied a hospital bed. He sent the USA Comfort to
right. I was about to say that myself.
Totally empty. He opened Jacob Javits Center. He opened a hospital in Long Island. He opened everything and did everything possible to satisfy the governor. But the governor, he has eating sour grapes, and he always had desires to become the president, never succeeded. So he's always trying to throw in a monkey wrench one after another. And President Trump has been able to make sure that all his wishes are fulfilled. We really should not politicize this whole corona thing. We should just talk about what is realistically possible and what President Trump has been doing. Hindsight is always 2020.
Right.
Hindsight wise, the lab in Wuhan should have been more aggressively monitored. Hindsight wise, Wuhan should have been contained right from day one. Our intelligence, the US intelligence in China, should have told us that, hey, listen, they have stopped people coming in and out of Wuhan. And Trump should have called the Chinese president and said, if you have stopped those people coming in, and why are you making the international travel happening? So those things, because remember, 3 million people traveled out of Wuhan internationally after the domestic ban happened. And it's a big city of 10 million.
Correct.
So hindsight is always 2020. What I'm seeing is the liberal left media do not point fingers towards China, do not point fingers towards President Xi. They all together in a mass gang only points fingers to President Trump.
And it is, what is tragic indeed is that, the famous saying that hindsight, 2020 vision is the greatest vision, and hindsight, everybody knows the answer to every question. So here, what I want is that, people are saying that he could have done things faster, but he was prevented from doing things faster, even though he acted on it. So I remember very clearly that when he stopped the traffic air flights coming from Europe, it was a total, European Union chief said that this is a single-handed act. It shouldn't have been done. But the reality is, as you rightly mentioned earlier, that maximum of virus infection came from Europe, Wuhan, China to Europe and here. So the question is that who was taking the precipitate action? It is very interesting. And it is that two governors, Cuomo in New York and the California Gavin Newsom, both of them heaped praises on Trump and his administration for taking care of and responding to, it's on record, it's not my thought, it's not my opinion. They have praised him. Actually, a Michigan Congress lady who claims that her life was saved because of certain things that Mr. Trump allowed. And the Democratic Party is now going to, reportedly it came in the media, that they are going to censure her for praising Trump. What happened to the party of love? This is where it bothers in the political part of it. But talking about the economic element of this one, this is big. Trillions of dollars have been pumped into the market, the businesses. And the one important part is that 70% of the economy is sustained by the consumers of America. This money ought to have gone directly to the accounts of people. The central government has all the data, whether it's IRS from the State Department, nothing is hidden anymore. So we are Social Security numbers and IRS knows us. If there was money to be given, they could have done it directly to the people rather than to the company. Because companies do it for a variety of purposes. And to that end, I agree an oversight is required to monitor that they are not paying bonuses to employees and buying back stocks of their own, which is what happened in 2008. So the point of the matter is that how does this flow of money, pumping of economy, has to work and must work? What is the best way to make it happen? Plus the opening up of the economy, which sectors? See, essential sectors are running. While the physicians and the frontline fighters in this battle, they deserve all our gratitude. But we also must express our gratitude to the agriculture farmers and transporters to making sure that the milk, eggs, butter, and food items are available in the shelves and there are no food riots. That's the point which I'm trying to talk about, is that how does this stimulus, how will this and how much will of this stimulus not go to institutions like Harvard or public limited companies? How do you monitor that and ensure that this stimulus of $4 trillion works?
Well, the first rule of the game is you do not let the fox in the hen house. As soon as you let all the big banks involved in this, in terms of distribution of the money, that all the money would be distributed by the banks, you let the fox into the hen house.
Right.
What did the banks do? They took their private banking clients and prioritized them over the small clients in terms of funding. So they made sure their private banking clients got funded best. Why? Because they took their money and invested in the equity market. Remember, as soon as the money started coming out, the equity market started going up. It had come down to 18,000. Now it is back to 12,000. Yeah. And it is all went back to the equity market. So what happened? No public company should have been funded, because public companies have many other ways to raise money. They can issue secondaries, they can borrow against their shares, they can use debentures. Those were the biggest mistakes. Small companies with annual revenue of more than 10 million should never have been funded. It is only companies less than 10 million who needs funding besides the consumers. Because imagine you are a restaurant owner. You have so much, 2 weeks of worth of inventory, which got now destroyed. You always hold on to 2 weeks salary because you're paying 2 weeks salary behind. Those money were had to be given out. So those small owners who hires almost 2/3 of the United States workforce did not get funded because of the missteps that the advantages that the big banks took. And you remember the Wells Fargo story? They did anything and everything. So this is exactly the repeat of those stories. And you know what is the saddest part? The saddest part is they cannot go to even jail for that. The saddest part is the federal criminal laws are such that they cannot go to jail for these criminal actions.
Very true. And that is the part which bothers me a lot, in the sense that, somewhere along the line, I'm a banker and we did significant amount of private banking and corporate banking work. But there was time that was different. And I know for a fact, in my opinion, that the abolition of Glass-Steagall Act is the root cause of the banking problem that is going on in the country. It's a classic reason for that.
Yeah.
And Glass-Steagall abolition is the reason why banks have become so irresponsible or too big to fail. And I say this as a banker, very unhappy about it, because it kept a clear demarcation between institutional frameworks of investment banking, insurance, and commercial banking. Today, commercial banks are no longer lending because the 3 or 4% spread that they made on small loans is no longer attractive. They are a storehouse of information. They can do trading just as investment banking did. That's the real reason. The other part which comes to my mind is this again about money, because money is going to play a big role. Now, there is suddenly a demand that there should be a global Marshall Plan, like after the World War II, and that, waive the debt, the African debt of $44 billion. The countries are asking for millions of dollars. One of the prime ministers of the countries, our neighboring country called Pakistan, he appealed to the world rich countries and rich institutions to support the poor. Now that brings about a very structural question here. He said, like I said, that if Dipak Nandi is a successful professional, people have perhaps to emulate his steps. What made you successful or made people like you successful? I'm not trying to flatter you or eulogize you, but stating an obvious fact. So the question is that what did you do? You took entrepreneurial decisions and took steps to make that effort a success. So very simply put, my question is that countries that are not doing well, right? Who people from those countries want to come to America. This brings about the issue of immigration. All want to come to America, still get angry with America because America is not letting everybody come. why don't the failed countries, using the United Nations mechanism, World Bank mechanism, reorient their economic philosophies in such a way that they also become like, to use a basketball jargon, they also become like Mike, right? So the question here is that why not follow the example of a successful country? Now that's what Modi ji said in his last United Nations speech, in which he said that we are an example of how we have learned to be successful, and we are trying be part of our mechanism. So is this the time that the global leadership will rise to attend to fundamental problems of poverty, of shortage of food, or is it going to become like same old, same old?
I'm afraid I wish your first proposition was taken in and people, but people have got used to handouts. They look out to the World Health Organization, the same corrupt World Health Organization, who is absolutely responsible for spreading this virus by colluding with China and saying that there is no human-to-human transmission on January 12th, 2020. So the same organization will keep going to the developed nations and give out money to developing nations without any kind of accountability. And take the example of your country, Pakistan. You know where most of the donation money goes to. In the name of serving the poor, they build jihad camps where only radical Islam is taught, and these people then becomes the camps for terrorism. So we have seen again and again that real education is not provided. Instead, we have madrasas in the name of education. But you know, that will not lead to productivity. That will not lead to industrialization. That will not lead to more consumption. That will only lead to radicalism.
No, since you mentioned Pakistan, I'm astonished, shocked, and really disappointed with those people that their land is still being used to make terrorist attacks on India, even in these days.
Correct.
You know, that shows debasement of the society or debasement of the human thinking, that those people who are doing this, they are not worried. They are taking advantage of somebody's inability or a catastrophe to pursue their whole thing. But that's the way the evil operates. Now, important part here now again is, you talked about China, you talked about, same old, but I'm an incorrigible optimist. I believe that eventually the goodness of human minds and human heart will prevail over the evil. And that's how our Sanatan principle always says, the victory of good over evil we have celebrated many times, and I'm sure we will celebrate again. But the question here is accountability and responsibility. Somebody triggered the Wuhan virus. I do not know where it happened. I read in the newspapers, just as you read, that, hey, it's going to be, it was in Wuhan labs, in a Wuhan city lab in China. Now, the question here is very important, is that will there be an authentic accountability as to who did it, whether it broke through a chemistry lab of a 7th grade student, or whether it was done through a college lab of a major virus being created and that genie went out, or was it a deliberate effort to test the instrument of war? I say this because, as the saying goes at sports, you are a sportsman too. Unless and until, if you bring the greatest of golf rackets and tennis racket, you will not become a good player. You have to practice and then you have to play the match. So the practice conditions and match conditions are different. Is this some kind of a test kind of thing which we see in movies, that whether the world is prepared, or was it like my favorite movie, Mission Impossible series, Mission Impossible 2, where the virus was talked about in the same way that is happening now? So do you think the world leadership today, this coronavirus is almost a third World War scenario, where millions of people are impacted globally? It has been gender neutral, age neutral, caste neutral, color neutral, country boundaries neutral, rich, poor neutral in every segment of the way. Will the leadership respond to determine who was accountable and how did it happen so that we can deal with it in the future?
Well, I think it was foolish of the previous US administration before President Trump to fund this P4 lab in Wuhan. How do you trust a communist country with such funding who are trying to make viruses which are extremely potent? And the United States funded it in the previous administration, under the Obama administration.
Right.
Having got funded, an accident happened, and in turn got the virus. Remember, bats have more than 20 million viruses. And then what happens? Then the communist China, in collusion with WHO, makes sure the world does not know that such an accident happens. Correct. And they aggressively suppress the evidence.
Right.
So I think it was very foolish part of the previous administration that they liked China so much, that they liked Cuba so much, they liked all the communist countries so much. And that is the agenda of the new party in the United States, to convert this country into a radical socialist country. And the whole thing, I'm very afraid that people will be sold the concept of radical socialism, and people will then start trusting the communist actions, which will only lead to more calamities like this.
That's a very dire warning. You are so. I subscribe to your thought in this regard, because if you remember, 2016 election, Mr. Trump was called about Putin's lackey. I mean, to put the word mildly, the New York Times and other liberal media, they said Trump is Putin's guy. He's a Manchurian candidate, and everything else they talked about collusion, which never got proved. Actually, it was found that the entire thing was instigated by the Democrats, one way or the other. And they pursued that entire thing as an impeachment trial. I'm not going to go into the demerits, merits, or justifications for that, but I do wish to say that that was really a sad scenario on US political might, military might, and economic might, that the Democrats made this guy look like evil when he was not. But in reality, as the students of geopolitics and being aware of the scenario, we know that the real collusion actually exists between the Democratic Party and the socialist structure. But that's what they want to implant here. Bernie Sanders had his honeymoon in Russia. I mean, I know St. Petersburg is very beautiful, but who goes to Russia for a honeymoon, okay? So, you could have gone to my Wyoming mountains for that matter. What I'm trying to say here is the Democratic Party, it was Hillary Clinton that wanted to set the buttons with this one. It was Barack Obama. I mean, the great guy, but he was caught telling President Medvedev that let the elections be over and I'll have more ability or leverage to do something. Flexibility was the word he used. My question is that people have not talked about it. And I'm 100% sure President Obama will write a chapter about that statement in his book. But the point of the matter is that real collusion, AOC, Ilhan, is basically designed to weaken the American structure, not realizing that if America is prosperous today, is because of the policies which was done. What they are bringing about will impoverish America in real terms. So that's what worries me a lot. And that's where the accountability factor is key to establish that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and it is so sad that this innovation, this capitalism, this free society allows the journalist to speak and talk and criticize President Trump. It is this radical socialism / communism which will make sure that no journalist is able to talk, that no journalist is able to criticize. Right. Radical socialism is the concept where nobody is allowed to ask questions. Yours is just to follow, and a few guys who enjoy the fruits of everybody's, like we see it in China, like we see it in Cuba, like we see it in Russia. And it is just mind-boggling, and I do not understand why the news media and why the New York Times constantly is championing the cause of radical socialism by leaders like AOC, and is trying to push that be the order of the day.
No,
And
there is a very simple reason for that. You know, when you are hungry, you're only looking for food, but your belly is full, you have everything around you, then you want to dabble into things that don't matter to you, forgetting that what got you here was a completely different approach. And that's the message that successful people, entrepreneurs, and capitalism has to instill. At the same time, you know, there is a thing called accountability and responsibility go together. Capitalist people also have to be careful, because, you know, you can't become too flagrant about your luxuries or display that the wage disparity, for that matter, what was 1 to 10 is now 1 to 100. So when, you know, the CEOs, for example, they bought their own stocks. They managed the entire scenario in such a way that their pay packets and benefits were making quantum leaps, but not the working class. And that's what is important, is to be able to make an inclusive society. I'm not saying that either or is to be blamed, but one thing is established. It is always the enterprise and innovation that brings about economic growth. That's established. You should do nothing that kills that frame of reference. And that's the difference between the socialism and capitalism, whereas socialism kills your initiative, leadership, ability to innovate and all that. Coming back to, there is another interesting thing that is happening around the world now. China used to have the killer loan agreement. It's a very famous term with the countries where they used to invest significant amount of money to build infrastructure by greasing the palm. Very favorable terms to itself, so much so that the loan agreement was called killer loan, because there was no way the borrower would have been able to pay back. So China acquired the countries and assets. Tanzania, that government and the new prime minister has canceled a $10 billion loan facility, saying that only a madman or a blind man or a stupid man would have signed that agreement. Kenya has canceled $2 billion. Sierra Leone, $400 million. So this has begun to happen because people are now seeing that China is actually abusing them. So that part is happening. Coming back to the other aspect, do you think, in my humble opinion, I think just as 50% of the economy is closed, other than the essential areas, should the stock market be closed as well for 7 days?
No, I don't think the stock market should be.
What I want to say is has a psychological dimension to that. When you announce the coronavirus happened, so many deaths are happening, companies are shutting down, airline business went out of the window, cruises went down, hotels are shut, travel agents are no longer working. There are a whole lot of industry that shut down, right? Which were visible. Massage parlors closed down. You know, your beauty parlors, you know, fortunately I don't have to have a haircut, nor do I have to shave. So I'm looking the same as yet. But there were a lot of people, a lot of the economy got affected and market tanked. What happened in the process was that market is going down. It is definitely hurting the middle class and the lower income class and 401k plans of middle income people that began to vanish in front of their eyes, creating much distress and stress. I'm not saying that shut down for quarantine the market for 50 days. I'm saying that when this particular crisis was hitting, if you had shut the market for 5 days, so that then everybody knows what to do once the market opens, once you know. But at this point in time, it favored high frequency traders or those who were liquid enough to buy low to sell high. That's the point which I'm saying. That is, this will be an argument of Democratic Party or Bernie Sanders that the rich got richer in this market by playing the market, stock market. That's the angle I'm taking here. Your thoughts?
Yeah, you're correct. I mean, the rich will always take advantage of the market. Right. And in the United States, unlike India, you are allowed to short the stocks.
Right.
And the advantage of being the ability to short the stocks is the companies have got to have a guardrails. So they are always watchful what I mean, what will backfire. So they are very careful with the downside,
Right.
and they prevent it from taking crazy risks.
Mhm.
So having said that, I would basically say the stock market needs to stay open so that we all can gauge where we stand on a day-to-day basis, because the end of the day, the proof of the pudding is in eating it, and the market is like eating your pudding. You exactly know where the country stands, or where any niche of the industry stands, where anything and everything stands. So I am, but one comment I will make, you're absolutely right. The Indian philosophy of the middle path, not too much on the right, too much on the left, is the right path. And the current Democratic Party pushing it towards radical socialism, almost to the point of communism, is no path for democracy, is no path for this country to succeed. We all Indians have come to this nation to enjoy the opportunities. In order to enjoy the opportunities, we need to study and struggle and raise our children and our grandchildren in a capitalistic society, so that they can work very hard, so that they can put out their very best, so that they can achieve the fruits of their labor and enjoy the fruits of labor that one does not see in a communist nation or in a radical socialist nation. And
There is no country in the world which is a shining example of communism making people richer. Even in China, communist China, it is quasi-capitalism that they have adopted. You can come and do, and everything that happened is because of the capitalistic expansion in China. Otherwise, you have the oligarchs who control everything, and that's why Russia has not grown as much, except they remain commodity traders or whatever it is. But the other point which comes very important in my mind is the fact that airline industry, and ecological balance is so bizarre, that how a resilience of Mother Earth and Mother Nature has fixed the climate change problem in a dramatic way. You have wild animals moving in the streets. Earth's temperature must have, there will be a big study, I'm sure, to analyze the impact of climate change. You are seeing things better. You are getting good visual pictures of sites around you. And, suddenly there is so much clarity around the world. So it is the Mother Nature, or since people failed, or what happened in that regard? That's a very important part. And the second thing which I would say is that it involves a lot of us Indians, is that more than 600,000 H-1B people are suffering here because of the uncertainty of the marketplace, laid off, immigration. An important part is that unless and until you take care of yourself, who do you take care of first, your own or the ones who are coming in? So immigration, both of us are immigrants. It's a very emotional issue. It's an economic issue for people who are directly beneficiaries of this one. So how do you see this argument, this debate shaping up going forward? Because Democrats' primary hold over the electorate is on immigration. They have no economic philosophy. Their economic philosophy is all about give away everything free. But this is the country that taught us there is no free lunch. So how can you make education free, healthcare free, then who is paying for it? And what if the people who are being taxed to pay for it choose to leave and go over to Bahamas or some other country? Where will the money come from? Your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So the H-1 immigrant visa, I myself currently for the last 30 days have been volunteering and treating at least one or two patients every day who have been affected by the coronavirus and have severe anxiety, severe depression,
right,
are overwhelmed with the uncertainty that you mentioned. Because of the uncertainty, they are ending up using more drugs. They are started to having more depression and started to having more anxiety. And no matter what you tell them, they're not able to read it correctly, that one has to just take one day at a time and wait till the whole economy opens, and hopefully we will, by God's grace, have a vaccination very soon, which will be partially potent, but will work enough for the society to boom back. President Trump has also initiated another $2 trillion for building up the infrastructure of the United States. Remember, President Bush lost $8 trillion in the Iraq war. 8. So it is time for more new opportunities, just like the United States built up the country after the Second World War. We'll have a robust economy coming up very soon, where everybody will get a chance to participate and at the same time build this country up. And I'm looking forward to that. This is part of my counseling / therapy to all these immigrants. India will continue to contribute to the US economy because it is the knowledge capital of the world. And because it is the knowledge capital of the world, US has an immense hunger for it and will continuously need that knowledge in order to be able to grow this current knowledge economy of the United States and in India. We are fortunate that we are currently being led by 2 global leaders in the 2 largest democracies whose thinking are so aligned. And we are misfortunate to have this serious disease now, but we are blessed to have 2 leaders who is very action oriented. Like in Gita, action is the best flower you can offer to God. They are both action oriented and task oriented. And because of their actions and relentless energy to contribute and bring things into action, that I think we will capture and conquer this disease, and we will come back with a robust economy. As long as we are able to suppress and understand the destructive effect of radical socialism and communism being pushed by the Democratic Party, which is pushed away because that is not good for us, that is not good for our children or our grandchildren. That does not give us the liberty that we are all striving to achieve in this nation.
I totally agree with you. This is a great conversation to have because we are going through tough times. And as the saying goes, tough times are meant for tough people to shine furthermore. And we will emerge out of that. Human resilience, country resilience is always very powerful. And I totally agree with you that somehow, somewhere along the line, in this particular period in time, the world's 2 most prominent democracies, United States and India, large size and history put together, the leadership is aligned, where both of them are, you use the word Bhagavad Gita, I call both of them as karma yogis.
Right.
They are karma yogis. I said this about Mr. Modi in 2014. In one of the programs, I said the man will win because he is a karma yogi. This statement is on record. I was the one who called Arvind Kejriwal a Notanki. That has stuck out to be true. But the point of the matter remains is that both of the people have seen that what works and what doesn't work. And, of course, India is a far more complicated a place than the United States is because of 1.3 billion people, and we inherited a structure. We are still not out of our, slavish mentality of the British rule, and we have to get out. And Mr. Modi has been doing a great job. And you are right that India's knowledge base will be the one which will benefit America most if it takes advantage of that. And right now, Prime Minister Modi has created that aura. I would not create it. I said he has restored the Indian aura in the eyes of the world around us. So India is looked upon as respect to people around us. So other than some of the medias fed by the left liberals giving Modi a gali here or there, actually his reputation goes up even more. So, hey, thank you, Dipak, for coming today. Delighted to have this conversation. very insightful thoughts. It is always a pleasure to connect with you. And, so we'll talk again. Meanwhile, viewers, have a great weekend. Be safe, be alert, and be blessed. And see you again next week.